Hello and welcome back, friends. This is Gina from McGuire, and I hope you're having a wonderful week. Today, I am sharing with you an oldie but goodie technique that I call Trapped, Embossed, Resist. This is where we create a colorful background, do heat embossing on top, and then apply ink over that gives a fun resist look. Now today I'm mostly going to go for soft but colorful backgrounds using a white pigment ink, but I'll talk about many variations along the way. I'll show how you can do this with background stamps and also with stencils, and then I'll show you some tips for creating some fun cards towards the end. Let's start by creating our Trapped, Embossed, Resist backgrounds, and then we'll make the cards. Now for this first example, I'm starting with white cardstock and applying a rainbow of color. Now you can apply any type of dye ink here that you want. You can even use distress inks for this, and you can try to blend them the best you can with whatever you have. Now I decided to save time and just put the ink directly to paper and not go for a perfect result. You really don't need it for this technique, which is one of the best things about it. I used all Hero Art shadow inks for this particular background, and I listed them at the top. It really doesn't matter what you use, you just want to make sure that it is completely dry before you move on to this next step. Next, I'm using my MISTI stamping tool, and I have my dry background that I'm putting into the corner of the tool. I will stamp this beautiful new Simon Says Stamp background right on top. You want to make sure again that your background of ink is completely dry. And you also want to use an anti-static powder bag over this to make sure that you don't have embossing powder sticking where you don't want it to. I wanted to show you a really easy way to test this. Before you stamp, try putting embossing powder on the background. If it sticks to your background, you know you need to heat set it more. Since mine was okay, I reapplied the anti-static powder tool. And now I'm stamping the floral background with VersaMark ink. Once I've firmly stamped that, I will add Hero Art's clear embossing powder. Any clear embossing powder will work here. I highly recommend using clear because that will trap the colorful background behind it. Next, I'm going to heat set it, and you can see how the embossing made it slightly darker in that patterned area. Now over this background, I'm applying Hero Art's Unicorn White Pigment Ink. Now you can use any type of ink blending tool to apply this ink, or you can go direct to paper. I found that the more ink you apply, the better the result. Every once in a while, I stop with a dry cloth and buff off the excess ink from the embossed areas. So what's happening is this white pigment ink is sitting on the paper over that beautiful color that we did, and it's giving a softer look. But in the raised heat embossed areas, it's resisting that ink, so we're able to wipe it away. So anywhere that we heat embossed will be darker, and the areas around it will be soft and muted and give like this creamy look. When I'm done, I reheat set it, which brings the shine back to the embossing, and you get beautiful results. Let's do a few more backgrounds. This is another that I created with all Hero Art shadow inks on white cardstock. Any dye inks would work for this. I just grabbed the ones that I use the most. I heat set it to dry completely, which takes a little bit of time. Then I use my anti-static powder tool, just like I did before, and stamp the same floral background stamp with VersaMark ink. I then added clear embossing powder. This will trap that bright color under the pattern of the stamp. Now once I have this completely heat embossed, I am going to this time apply some shimmer inks. I first started with Delicata Golden Glitz ink. This is a nice gold ink. It's a pigment ink that will give gold shine to the background, but the embossing will resist it so we can wipe it away from the patterned areas. However, that was a little bit too light. I wanted more contrast. So I came in with the copper ink of Delicata, put that on top, and then rubbed away the excess. And look at that gorgeous shimmer background that we get, along with the glossy looking heat embossed pattern. After you've applied all of your inks, I recommend reheat setting your background because that brings the shine back to the heat embossed areas. So here you can see that copper golden shine that we have in the background that surrounds our heat embossing. Here's another that I created with the same colors, but kind of in a splotchy look. I then clear heat embossed the same image on top, but this time I'm adding a colored ink, so you can put colored inks on top of your background. This is Hero Art's Ultra Pink ink, and I'm using an ink blending tool, wiping away the excess with the dry cloth, and then heat setting it when I'm done. I end up with a very bright background that has a unique look because of this trapped heat embossed resist technique that we're doing. I will admit I forgot to use my anti-static powder tool before clear heat embossing the floral image. So you can see there's some powder where I don't want it in the background, but I still feel like I can use this on a card. Here's another example, but this time with the Simon Says stamp Flourish background stamp. I created a dye ink background and let it dry completely. Then I stamped the Flourish stamp with VersaMark ink and added clear embossing powder. You can see how where the embossing was, it becomes darker, but we're going to make that contrast even more by applying Hero Art's Unicorn White pigment ink over it. This makes the area without the heat embossing softer, so the contrast is more. All right, here's another example. I am again applying a bunch of different Hero Art shadow inks. I find it's best to do this in stripes or small areas just to save time. You can see how I use the edge of my ink pad to really quickly apply ink to the background, but you could use an ink blending tool to do this. You just want to make sure you get a lot of ink and color down. Once it was completely dry, I'm using my anti-static powder tool, and this time I am clear heat embossing a butterfly background from Simon Says stamp. After I've done the heat embossing, I'm applying a generous amount of Hero Art's Unicorn White pigment ink over top, using an ink blending tool to really work it into the background. I can then buff off the excess with the dry cloth. But at this point, I decided I wanted to add some shimmer to the background. So I've come in with my Delicata white shimmer ink. This will again give a white or softer looking background, but I'll have lots of shimmer on it. And anywhere we trapped color underneath with the heat embossing, it will remain dark. This is a very subtle example since I used lighter colors, but I'll have some more vibrant ones here in a moment. I do like the look of that shimmer ink on the background. Okay, this one will have much more contrast. I'm starting with a rainbow background that is made of Hero Arts and Gina design inks. Once I'm sure that is completely dry, I put it in my MISTI and use my anti-static powder tool. Then I'm going to stamp that same butterfly outline image with VersaMark ink and add clear embossing powder. Basically, I'm trapping that vibrant color underneath my heat embossing. Now this time I'm going for a high contrast, not a soft look. And so I'm going to apply over my heat embossing Gina Jet Black Amalgam ink. Most black dye inks will work for this. You want to generously apply it over your background and buff off the excess ink. So what's happening is your heat embossed image will resist this ink, and the cardstock background will take the ink. So your color will be showing through your heat embossing, but everything else will be black. Now I thought I would step this up a bit by applying Delicata black shimmer ink over this. So I end up with a shimmery black background with the bright, vibrant heat embossing. Once I'm done with that and wipe off the excess, I can heat it, and that will bring the shine back to the embossing powder. And there you can see a high contrast background. Before we move on to making these into cards, I wanted to show you how to do this with a stencil. This time I'm starting with Hero Arts inks and creating little circle areas by using the corner of my ink pad. Don't worry if they don't blend together, it really doesn't matter. Often when you heat set dye inks, they'll blend into the paper and smooth out nicely, as you see here. Okay, next I have the Simon Says stamp Bouquet of Roses stencil, which is just beautiful. And I'm putting it onto my Ranger Make Art Station. Now this is a magnetic board, so I can use these little magnets that come with it to hold my stencil onto my paper, since the tape wasn't wanting to stick to my inked background. Once I have it in place, I can use VersaMark ink and an ink blending tool to apply a generous amount of VersaMark ink over the openings of the stencil. I then can add clear embossing powder to that ink, which will give us a beautiful, solid-looking heat embossed image on our colorful background. So with the stamps before, we had more delicate outlines of heat embossing. This gives us larger solid areas, which will show more with this technique. Once that's dry, I can generously apply lots of Hero Arts Unicorn White Pigment ink, which is my favorite for this technique. Then buff away the excess with a dry cloth and reheat set it to make the shine come back to the embossed areas. I really like the contrast between the darker color that's trapped under the heat embossing and the softer, creamier color that's around it thanks to that white pigment ink. I thought I would step this up a bit by stamping over it, which is something that you can do with the Trapped Embossed Resist technique. So I'm using the Simon Says Stamp Sketchline background and stamping over it with Tide Pool ink. Once I'm done, I'm using my dry cloth to wipe the excess ink away from the heat embossed areas that are resisting it. Then we end up with that stamped grid looking pattern around our heat embossing, which gives a beautiful result. So you can see from these backgrounds that I created that there are many ways to do this technique. I went for mostly softer backgrounds today, but I'll be sure to share more examples in future videos. Okay, now that we have a bunch of backgrounds made, I wanted to share some tips for creating cards with them. Now for this first card, and for many others, I used some new frame dies from Simon Says Stamp, including this poppy frame die. If you look at the frame on this die, it has lots of detail to it. So I decided I wanted to use these frames, but not the images inside of the frames. This is an excellent way to get more out of any dies you have, especially frame dies like this one. I really like the details in the frame, but wanted to skip the flowers in the center. I'll use the dies as is in a future video, but today I'm just using the frames. So I die cut each frame from white cardstock 3 times. And as you can see here, I'm cutting the flower away from the center of the frame. So for this particular one, I have 3 frame dies and I'm cutting out those flowers. And I can save those flowers for a future project. But for this one, I'm just using the 3 frame dies that are the same. Next, I'll use Gina K Connect adhesive, which is my favorite liquid glue. And I'll use that to glue all 3 of these frames together. That will give me a stacked dimension on my card. You could use 1 frame die cut if you want, but by putting the 3 together, it really makes the card pop. Sometimes little things like this make a big difference. Now for the center of my frame, I wanted to use a flower that matched my background. So I decided to use the background stamp itself to heat emboss on white cardstock. So I'm stamping with clear embossing powder, and I'll heat emboss with Ranger Platinum embossing powder. This is a great embossing powder because it's kind of halfway between silver and gold, and that it's a warm silver, which was perfect for this card. After I heat set it, I decided to cut out one of the flowers and a few of the leaves. If I wanted to, I could have used this older Simon Says Stamp Spring Flower stamp set. It matches that background perfectly, but I decided that I wanted to make use of my background by cutting out one of the flowers instead. I did want to show you this stamp set because I like how Simon Says Stamp makes multiple stamps that go together nicely. Now once I have this completely cut out, one of the things I like to do is reheat set the embossing powder. Since I cut up right onto the embossing, sometimes it gives it a sharp edge. By reheat setting it, it gives it a nice smooth edge that makes a big difference on the final card. Sometimes it's little things like that that really make a card look finished. Next, I use the Simon Says Stamp CZ Designs Archie Jr. dies. This is a great alphabet die set that's the perfect size for cards. I stack 3 together each of the letters for the word hugs, glued them together, then used a piece of tape to connect them, put adhesive on the back of that, and transferred that to my card. That way I could be sure they were centered and perfectly positioned. So here you can get a closer look of that soft, creamy background around the vibrant heat embossing. It's really nice in real life and has a beautiful finish to it. I also like that I used that frame to make that center stand out. I didn't block off any of the center because I kept the frame open, but it did give it a finished look. Now here's another example. This is the one where I used the metallic ink over the background. Now for this one, I used the center of the Dahlia frame. Remember how I cut that flower from the center of the frame? I glued that onto my card along with sentiment strips with sentiments from this new Simon Says Stamp Tiny Words Encouragement stamp set. I'm a big fan of these tiny word stamp sets from Simon Says Stamp. So many sentiments in one set, and they're perfect for those little strips that are great on just about any card. I decided to keep this card quite simple since there's so much going on with that golden background. Now here is that super bright one that I created when I put ultra pink over the heat embossing. I die cut a large heart from platinum vellum. And on top of that, I added the sentiment that says Crafty Friend. I then added a thin sentiment strip over that. Sometimes when you're not sure what to do on a busy background like this, all you need is a sentiment. Now both of the words Crafty and Friend are dies from Heffy Doodle. I die cut each 3 times and stacked them on top of each other for lots of dimension. On top of those stacked die cuts, I added a thin sentiment strip. Now this one that says Sending You a Paper Hug is from the Simon Says Stamp Sentiment Strips pack. This has lots of pre-printed sentiments. These are new ones that you can foil if you want, but I just decided to add it as is. And I felt that particular sentiment was perfect to go with the word Crafty Friend. Okay, my next example is the one where I did white shimmer ink over the butterfly background. You can see I have a stacked frame die, just like I showed you earlier. And then I added a butterfly to the center that I created with the Ranger Platinum Embossing Powder. Now that butterfly is from the Simon Says Stamp Comfort and Prayer stamp set, which matches perfectly with that outline butterfly background stamp. Now you can see there are beautiful sentiments you can build up with the stamp set too. However, I decided to use a sentiment from that Tiny Words Encouragement stamp set that I showed you earlier. I thought it looked great in the center of that butterfly. Now here's my other butterfly background with the black shimmer that I put over the heat embossing. This one, I added just a simple black uncolored butterfly from that Comfort and Prayer stamp set that I just showed you. And I have a stacked frame that I filled with white cardstock. I felt that let the sentiment stand out more against that really vibrant background. Now that Hello There sentiment is from the Simon Says Stamp Hello Darling stamp set. I thought that design was fun for this particular card, and there are many great sentiments in this set. In fact, I'll be using this set again very soon in a video. Okay, now here we have our stenciled background where we stamped over it. I decided to keep this card very simple since there's so much going on in that background and I didn't want to cover it up. I added a Hello die cut that's stacked. This is actually from a Poppy Stamp Luscious Script Hello die. The die set comes with the shadow and the word itself. So I decided to use white and teal to match the background. Now for that Have a Beautiful Day, it's from this Simon Says Stamp Wake Up and Makeup stamp set. There are some really fun sentiments and makeup images in the set, but I decided just to use a small one that says Have a Beautiful Day, and that worked perfect for this card. Remember that sometimes even if the stamp set doesn't go with the card you're making, there are sometimes sentiments that will work. Okay, it's time for my last example. I use one of my Trapped Embossed Resist backgrounds, but I also show you a way to get more out of a background die. I have this fun Simon Says Stamp Mom Floral Frame die cut, but I decided to give it a new look by cutting the word Mom out of the center. So just by cutting around the little floral images in the edge, I was able to give it a completely different use. I added it with foam tape onto my heat embossed background and then added a Hugs sentiment from Birch Press in the center. I also stamped You're Amazing from the Tiny Words Encouragement stamp set that I showed you earlier. So by cutting out the word Mom and replacing it with Hugs, I was able to use this for a different occasion. I encourage you to look at your background dies or other word dies in a new light and see what other uses you can get from them. And before we go, remember, when I created all these 6x6 backgrounds and trimmed them down for my cards, I have all of these leftover pieces, but don't get rid of them. You can use them on cards. Scraps like this are excellent, and I'll link to a video showing some ideas here on the top right. I hope you'll try these trapped embossed resist techniques with whatever background stamps or stencils you have. It's really fun to do, and I'll share more ideas for this technique in future videos. I link to the supplies I use in my YouTube description below. My blog has much more information, and you can find that on the top right here. In the middle are a couple other videos you might like, and then also you can subscribe by clicking on the top left. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon, and have a wonderful week.